Welcome to the Don't Go There podcast. I'm Dr. Brenda Gazelle, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Samantha Seaton, Amanda Krotzer, and Jennifer Sasaki. We are four psychotherapists going toward mental health issues that aren't often discussed. And our podcast may go to psychological places that are both scary and exciting. We hope to inspire authenticity and vulnerability. We want to go there, and we're so happy you've decided to go there with us. We're asking the question, is there value in depression? Which is a powerful question. Mm-hmm. Because I know that as soon as depression hits for so many people, there is no value. It's just run as fast as you can. Mm-hmm. Because we are taught not to tolerate pain of any sort, especially psychologically. And there's a shame attached to it. Usually we think, oh, you're depressed. Something's wrong with you. You need to figure out how to get happy. And there's a sense that you're not supposed to show your depression. There's many types of depression. I think it's important to talk about those as well. First, we have just normal reactive depression, which means if someone close to you dies, that you're going to feel loss and pain, and it could come out in some feelings of depression, hopelessness, and symptoms of depression as well. That's pretty normal, and it's part of a grieving process. And then there's also biological or endogenous depressions, and those usually have a genetic component, and what that means is, it might be handed down to you. So if your dad or mom were depressed, you might be depressed, and then you may be recurrently depressed throughout your life. And then there's also symptoms of depressions that come because of realizations in our lives, crises in our lives. Thus, something like a quarter-life crisis or a midlife crisis. Each of these can occur separately, but they also can occur at the same time. So you go into therapy, or you just are looking at yourself and you're not sure what's happening, and it can be very confusing. And so it's important to understand there's different types, and also that hiding it is never helpful. And I think the most important piece that we want to discuss is, when is darkness, when is depression, when is pain, when is hopelessness valuable? And I think that personally what I see is it's most valuable when it seems that the way in which we've decided to live our life consciously does not match up with the way that our soul would like to live. So that's an abstract idea, but that our soul has a different call for us, a more creative call, a more expansive call. So maybe you decided consciously you should be a finance person or a lawyer or a doctor, and you went through med school and you went and got your law degree, and then you married just the quote unquote perfect husband or wife, and now you're making money and you live in the quote unquote perfect house and everything's a success, and yet your soul or something inside of you becomes really depressed. You start feeling sad and hopeless, and there's no joy, and you don't know what to do with that except why would I possibly be feeling this way when there's so much goodness in my life and I've created everything that I was supposed to do and get, and yet something still isn't right. That's the point where you can either go and say, I'm going to do everything I can not to listen to that darkness, not to listen to that no joy, cut it off, put a smile on, I don't know, get some medication, go on a vacation, go on several vacations, or like people do, have an affair, and then hide it, and then we now are compacting the pain. Or we can stop and we can get real curious and listen and say, maybe everything that is supposed to be, that should be, isn't the answer. Maybe I'm a completely different person than I thought I was supposed to be. Maybe I'm far more creative, and maybe the person that I am, or I'm far more intellectual, or I'm far more anything. But that there is an incongruence between soul and conscious mind, and that there can be beauty and value in searching for that. And I know I've personally watched people find value in their depression, but it does mean going towards powerlessness, the unknown, and the dark. And we are not taught in our culture to do that. Mm-hmm. And so we only fear it and we don't see the value. Okay, so I've talked a lot. What do you think as I speak about the value of depression? Does it resonate? Thoughts, ideas? Is there value, or should we just run from it?
Oh, it definitely resonates. This is common, in my practice, as well as my personal life. As you're talking, I'm thinking about my life currently, and, this is something that has come up so many times for myself, where this sadness or depression comes on, and I find this need for a quick fix. Let me figure out how to solve this now. I'll go see my therapist. I will talk through it. I'll be better. I'll get better, which is a good step, to see my therapist, to talk through and process. But what I don't want to do is give light to my soul. I really struggle with listening to that side of myself, as I see my clients do, because there's an acknowledgement that I have to accept, essentially a death of the life I've always known and that I've held on to, and that is predictable for me. I don't know if that's making sense.
Makes perfect sense, because that's the piece that I'm talking about, is that you're so familiar and you're right in the place where you should be, that there's the illusion of safety in that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the idea to then go into the unfamiliar and lose everything you fought your whole life to attain.
And achieve.
Yeah.
And get to. But there have been times where I have given that space to my soul, because this isn't a one and done type thing. This is something that unfortunately keeps coming back around. And I say unfortunately because it's not easier any time you have to go through it again. It's still hard, and it's still painful, and it's still very difficult. And so there's been times where I've been able to give voice and give light to my soul, and allow myself to be in that depression and to be in that pain, and to work through it, and to allow those other parts to die off so that my soul can have that space. And there's been tremendous healing that's come through that, and growth in ways that I wasn't aware that I was able to attain or achieve. So being a person who likes to achieve and perform, I was able to do that in newer, different ways than before.
Thank you. Yeah. And I want to clarify for the listeners that when we're talking about soul, it can be so abstract. So I would like to borrow James Hollis's definition, which is a meaning-making organ. That there's something in us that needs to have meaning. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about soul.
Right.
And that so often we lose that meaning in our life, even though we think that we were going towards something that would make it meaningful, or at least happy.
Yeah, I have so much that I have been thinking, and then kind of piggybacking off of what you were saying, Amanda. It was interesting that as I was listening to you, I was like, yeah, totally. And then I caught the word better. Like, I need to feel better. And I thought, like, oh yeah, I could feel that totally, in my personal life right now. Like, what's the matter? I need to feel better. And I thought, wow, even right there, that word better, it describes a paradigm in which what I'm feeling has judgment attached to it automatically. That depression, negative affect, bad feelings, pretty much, are immediately categorized as there's a judgment instantly placed on that. I mean, yes, I don't know about you guys, but my negative feelings are like physically painful. Like it hurts, like my heart will hurt, my back will hurt, or my gut will ache, or my throat will close up, or I just my chest will implode, and there's heaviness. And I wrote down the name of I listened to another podcast. There's a woman named Susan David who wrote a book called Emotional Agility, and I think she's a professor at Harvard, and she had this really beautiful, very different than how I've been taught to think about emotions, but this really beautiful, clear way of explaining her point. And her point was that throughout our life, in order to bring some sort of sanity and health to our life, we want to be working towards emotional agility. And I like that word because it was like a flexibility in our emotional life. And the way she described it was in thinking about our emotions purely as data. rather than direction. And I loved that because I thought the minute my negative feelings hit, I'm like, oh, direction. There's a problem to be solved. There's a thing to be fixed. There's something to be done, rather than like, oh man, this is some interesting data. Like, this is some like, oh, I've got all these wonderful things going on in my life, but this feeling brings some really interesting data to my life. And I know I'm still young in my life journey, but I can get really frustrated of being in personal therapy and being a therapist for so long. I still have a really hard time. And maybe this is just the human condition. It's hard to sit with those dark feelings and just not judge and feel like there is amazing data here. Because maybe I do need to leave my marriage, but maybe I don't. Maybe this is like the ghost of my father.
Beautiful.
Like calling to me and telling me it's not okay for me to lean into this beautiful new direction and love an imperfect person. It's confusing. It is really hard for me to hold those negative feelings. And I sat in the kitchen last night with my future husband, and we were supposed to be having a simple conversation about these bills for moving into this home, and I imploded. And this morning I woke up and the dear heart looked at me and was like, terror in his eyes, and he sat with me and it was beautiful. But he confessed, like, it's hard for me to not take that as direction, like we need to do something. And I was like, yeah, it is hard. That something that feels so terrible might not be a problem. It might just be a shit ton of data. And that I need to sort through my data and that I will get back to you. It's like holding that and becoming like emotionally agile enough to sit with the dark night. I mean, even in calling it dark is like got a judgment attached. Because dark is sometimes magical and beautiful, you know, like I want some nice dark rich curtains in my room because they bring some pizzazz. But my feelings, like, bright and shiny, please. Please only bright and shiny. Because if I'm dark, like, only a few people will think I'm cool, and that'll probably get real quick. So there's so much attached to it. But that's what I was thinking, that word better and data versus direction. It's hard to come back to that over and over again.
Well, I love to jump in there because I remember seeing that and thinking about trying to do some advertising for my psychotherapy practice. And I saw that a lot, like, feel better. Right? And I'm like, oh yeah, well, that's what everyone wants. So, like, shouldn't I put that, like, feel better, call today? And I thought, oh, but that's such, excuse me, but bullshit. You know, it's like we even put in our informed consent, you know, you're going to feel worse before you feel better, because the way in which we quote unquote feel better is to acknowledge what isn't feeling good. We need to go there and look at it. That's all. And so you say data. Yes, exactly. I mean, that is Irvin Yalom's, you know, a psychotherapist who does, very famous for groups and other books. But, you know, that's what he's constantly asking us as therapists and people to do, is use it as information. Everything we have coming up is delightful. And, you know, maybe it doesn't feel delightful, but that it is delightful if we get curious. And yet, we're taught not to do that. And so we don't notice that there's any value in our quote unquote dark feelings, but we can reach to people far before us. If we think about, you know, the dark night of the soul, these are the mystics, right? Of St. John and people who are saying, yes, the way in which we get to know God is in the darkness, in the belly of the well, in the moments that we are sitting in the flood and thinking we'll never see land again, but we're on our ark. That these are the places where we learn about Jesus. You know, Kierkegaard says the closer we get to our own darkness and our own humanity, then we know about compassion, faith, because then we know about the real stuff. So darkness is in so many ways an answer, and yet we fear valuing dark. There was a book you introduced me to, Learning to Walk, Sam.
Oh yeah,
Learning to Walk in the Dark.
Barbara Brown Taylor, I think. She's an Episcopal priest.
Yes.
Pastor?
Yeah. And she found that too. But, you know, again, it is so much easier, isn't it? Just to say, let's not look at it.
Turn the lights back on.
Because
don't go there.
Let's not go there. Yes. Because beautiful, right? Exactly. Because the opposite of going towards the dark, right, is, you would think, staying in the light. That there's this myth, illusion, and idea that I can stay in the light. But the truth is, when the dark visits and you keep pushing it down, at some point, you're going to pay the bill. That's why I think depressions just come up sometimes and they just take people out. I mean, it's because they've been pushing it down for so long. Mm-hmm. If the dark comes up, and every time it comes up a little bit, just like anger, we listen and we talk about it, then it won't overwhelm us so profoundly. But if the dark's been trying to tell us something, just like anger is, and we won't listen, then rage will occur, or huge depression will occur, because it's like, you weren't listening. Knock, knock, knock. That, something's knocking on your door. That meaning-making organ is knocking, and you won't listen. And finally, it has to take you down. Then you go, all right, what do you want to tell me? Because I'm laid out.
Mm-hmm. The metaphor that comes to mind is like when you're in the ocean, when you're surfing or body surfing or just trying to keep your head above water like me, and you get taken down by a big wave. And I think that's the hardest part, is that part of depression where it's super confusing and you don't know what to listen to and what to follow. You don't know which direction to take yet. And there's so much data in so many different directions. And it's so hard to believe that there's something of value in that space.
Yes.
Before any direction has come. And like what they tell you to do in, any kind of lifeguarding or any kind of swimming, they just let go. You surrender and you naturally pop to the surface. But the terror of, well, what if I swim the wrong direction? What if I get even further? What if I never get out of this? What if I let go of the wrong thing? Like, it's so counterintuitive to let go and let whatever is going to come. Whatever data wants to come can come. I mean, I know I've survived so many moments of that in my life, and the data is usually not as terrifying as I think it's going to be. But the descent and the letting go and the surrendering and the waiting for that piece of information to emerge, like the things I'm terrified of are crazy. They really are. Mm-hmm. Because it's usually never that, but the terror is still there every time. Every time.
Funny, I actually had that experience when I was maybe in 4th or 5th grade, and I went to the river with a friend. And it was the first time I had gone to the river, and her dad took us out on the boat, went back in the cove to set up, camp and stuff. And her and I jumped in the river and we're playing around, and we got caught in the current. And I went under and would swim and swim and swim to, we were starting to panic and trying to get back to the shore and swim. And she ended up making it to the side. And I sat there and swam and panicked for so long. And I finally let go. I was too tired. I let go and went with the current. And it took me right down to like where I could reach a branch and then grab on and climb up. And that stuck with me so long, that feeling of just like, I was working so hard to get away from it and to get out of it instead of just going with it. So, and I think we are a fix-it mentality society, and we work to fix this depression or this feeling or this sadness. And we end up we might be able to avoid it for a while, but we avoid good too. Mm-hmm. We avoid connecting, we avoid ourselves.
Yes.
And I think I can think about the depressions that I've been in, and honestly, sometimes, not that I crave it, but I have felt the most connected to myself in those places. Yeah. Then the other times where I'm just going, I'm keeping my head up. I'm, have my checklist of things to do, and I'm, it's looking good on the outside. Everything's cruising along, but I feel so disconnected from me a lot of times in those places, instead of embracing, the feelings, embracing whatever's going on and sitting with myself. And I start missing that sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it takes that. It is that depression that finally knocks on my door that says, hey, pay attention to me. I'm still here, or there's still these feelings here. And it takes something bigger to get me to stop and sit with it.
A question I get a lot of times, though, is, okay, you want me to go sit in it. What if I get stuck there? What do I do if I get stuck? There's a fear because it's so unknown. What happens if I can't leave that? I just want to throw that out.
No, it's a good question, because there's a spiraling effect.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
That's this, what if I let go and I just get sucked into a vortex and
black hole
and die?
Yeah.
And
I think for me, because I hear that a lot too from my clients, I feel like I'm there with them. I can help, they're not alone in that space anymore, where I think we have felt so alone because we don't want to let someone in, because we don't want to be in there. but it's letting the therapist in, or a, you know, spouse or a close friend in. And that person, to me, can help anchor you some, you know, that I'm not going to let you go until you're, you know, gone. So
this is such an important piece, though, because I know that when you are really depressed, so some people will forget that they've ever been happy. It's like there's no memory of that. They lose a sense of time. So they'll say, no, it's never been good. It's always been dark. It's always been bad. And then suicide, you know, that is a part of depression. So when we're talking about it, we're talking about something very serious, that there is a place where people just get so dark, they can't remember anything at all. And then they say the only way out is to die. And then they literalize it.
Yeah.
And so that is, you know, when we say there's value in depression, there's value in the darkness, stay there, sit in it. Yes, Jen, you're so right. But we need to be with somebody. We need to share it with somebody, sit in it with somebody else. And so we need to like enunciate that again and again. It's not about, and we're therapists, so we're so used to saying, of course we're with our therapist because we've all done years of therapy.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, bring it with somebody else that can say to you, you haven't always felt this way, and you're literalizing your depression. That yes, we all want to, when you're depressed, you often want to die, but it's not that you want to die. You want something in it to die. And if we get curious, we can figure out what that is, and we don't need to literalize it. But it's so easy to do that when we're by ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I definitely think there's a point, though, where it becomes counterproductive.
Go, yes.
Yeah.
So say more.
Well, I'm thinking, because I think about with my clients, there's a point where you want to embrace it and feel it and sit, you know, with them in it. And then there's a point where if I'm hearing certain thoughts, you know, the suicidal, or it sounds like they are completely covered, you know, and can't even see what they can get out of it, you know, and what they can learn from it. To me, that's the point where I'm like, okay, maybe we need to do medication for this, you know, to equalize it. So I think there's a certain point to listen for.
Oh, but see, I'm not saying that medication's bad or that we shouldn't have it the whole time. I think medication can be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I am curious about, if you hear certain thoughts, do you suddenly stop them from going to a certain place?
I don't know. I don't think I stop them from going to the place, but I definitely think there's just something that comes up more for me, that they're saying they need more support than, you know, maybe the one person or the one time a week or something. So I just think it's always important to watch that line of when it crosses over from being productive and helpful, and which you can go quite a ways in that space, you know, where there's that line that they think I can't tolerate. I think that's important to listen to also.
That's interesting that you say that. I'm going to go like 100% full nerd on all of you. It makes me think about a paper that Freud wrote about melancholia versus depression. I think it's melancholia versus depression. That's the two words, I think.
Yes.
But I remember like a pivotal moment for me in my own personal work, and then reading that paper in graduate school that reminded me, or brought to light that usually the pain that is getting to that point for me is the self-loathing, not the depression. The data isn't causing me that much pain. It's my hating of myself because the self is emerging the data that causes that much pain. And that I can and have habitually learned growing up in a home where my emotional data was not welcome. I learned very early to attack myself to shut the data down. So for me, the automatic response is, oh, here's some data. I effing hate myself. It doesn't matter to me. It's all that judgment. It's all like, I need to feel better. But when I can, like I'm almost depressing. I mean, if you think I'm a visual person. So if I think like if I'm depressing something, I've got my hand on it and I'm pushing it down. I'm literally depressing myself because I don't want what is trying to come up. And if I can catch the self-loathing and practice radical self-acceptance, usually I break through. Usually the data will emerge and break through. And sometimes it does, I think, take medication, because sometimes, I mean, I don't know, I only know my experience, and I know that sometimes it gets really extreme, but I think that there's like these little subtle nuances that can happen. And I like his paper because it does a nice job of breaking out like this melancholic self-loathing and self-hatred that can come alongside depression and prolong it. Because depression is oftentimes the emerging of this data that requires grief. That requires like a different kind of feeling, but we will, as a self-care mechanism, shut down the grief with self-loathing.
So I think that's important, though, because what you're doing is differentiating between a psychodynamic term of depression and a DSM term. Because in the DSM, right, when we think of depression, it is part of self-loathing. Right? Because we differentiate grief, for the listeners, we differentiate grief as being something where we're just feeling the loss, and then it moves into depression. We know when we see ourselves as defective and the self-loathing begins. So it's how we diagnose depression is a self-loathing piece. But psychodynamically, which is lovely, right? Freud is able to say, wait a second, there's two different phenomena. There's data that something's coming up that you need to listen to, and your self-loathing might get in the way. And so that's a more profound idea of depression, and I think more illuminating than the DSM.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thanks for highlighting that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my self-loathing is super comforting in a weird kind of sadistic way.
Oh, you have power then. You can have a illusion of control. If I fix myself just enough, then I don't have to feel the loss.
Yeah, it's like a nice little bludgeoning I carry with me all day long that's like comforting because it's familiar, and it's terrifying to like actually believe I'm worthy of love and value and acceptance and, you know, everything in life while this raunchy data emerges. What? It's like...
I love that. I love that we're going right there. So that's such another piece of depression, and the value of it is when abundance and good things enter into your life, and then you notice symptoms of depression hitting. What a wild paradox. That everything is supposed to be, that you've always wanted, now enters, and now you're actually following after your soul's call. It's emerging, and you're here, and you quote unquote are like, I'm getting everything I always wanted, and yet depression visits. What the hell?
What the hell, indeed. Indeed.
Sums it up. What the hell?
Because if you're so used to self-loathing, and it's such a familiar, safe place, then to let go of that and really embrace that you deserve it and enjoy it would mean grieving how little you got in the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think some too, we help keep the depression at bay by having these goals out there for ourselves and this hope. You know, we go, oh, I'll feel better when I become this, when I get this person, when I do this. We accomplish all that and we're still stuck. Yeah, we're still depressed. We have to then face it. So,
well, yes, there's that piece, which is that we've always had an ideal. And then when we hit the ideal, we find, oh gosh, it's still empty.
Yeah.
Shoot, it wasn't about that. It was about something internal. And no matter what I do, right?
Yeah.
It's like I got a PhD and now I'm like, oh shoot, well, I didn't fulfill it. Maybe if I get a PsyD next, right? Because that'd be more clinical than research. And believe me, that's gone through my mind often. And I have to stop and go, Brenda, don't go get a PsyD. Just stop. Just stop. But I still want to do it. So, but nonetheless, so there's the piece. But that's different than just a, you know, say 5-7 years of your own therapeutic work, right? And now you are just getting to know yourself enough that you're open to really being in intimate relationship that is nurturing and good. And you know it's a good space. You know that it's healthy. You know that it's right. But yet something else comes. Yes?
Preach.
And what is it that visits? What is that that's visiting? What is it trying to tell you? I mean, it has something to say. It's saying, don't get comfortable here.
Yeah.
It's that scary piece.
A wise woman once said the sacrifice of non-arrival comes to mind. Go ahead.
Yes. And that's all, can't think of his name right now. I'll think of it, but go ahead.
Even when you're saying that in my head, because I'm so in the midst of this right now, is you didn't work hard enough to deserve that. And it's like, it's confusing because like, wait, no, he tells me I deserve this. He's proving this. He loves me unconditionally. It's okay.
This is your boyfriend.
Yeah, my boyfriend.
Okay.
You didn't work hard enough. You don't deserve that. And so it's as soon as things are good and I've been able to be in some level of happiness and joy, that this self-loathing and hate comes up, that I'm so internally in conflict that it's almost this depression wants to take over so bad that I'm willing to sacrifice all my happiness to go back to the beginning, to fight for achieving.
Yes.
To be bummed out again that I can't feel good. It's like I know where it's going to end if I keep this going, but it's predictable and it's safe that way, and this is not safe because I don't know how this works.
It was so vulnerable. Just thinking, God, I'm in a really similar spot in my life. We're about to get married. We just got this beautiful home, and I was a homeless kid growing up, so this is symbolic for me on like so many, not symbolic, this is like life-changing on so many levels. And I was just thinking as you were talking, like, I'm in the middle of this too, so I don't have any answers, but I was just thinking, like, what would I have to feel if I let go of that whole process? The vulnerability of losing it all. Could lose it all. I could lose everything. And I don't want it. So I don't know. I think maybe I don't know how else to comfort myself in that vulnerability. So I just kind of tear it all down and go back to the beginning and start over again. Because at least then I don't have to look the vulnerability in the eye and I just get busy doing.
Right.
I think that's what it is. I mean, it's still there.
Yeah.
And I think it's knocking on my door and it's like, hey, sweetheart. Yes, you could love these people this much. You could finally feel like a treasured, valued, adored human being. And he will die. And you will die. And your children might hate you. And one of them might be an addict. And the house might burn down tomorrow. And I don't know how to lean in and go, oh my God, you could love something so much. And I don't know how to kiss their faces. So I'll pick a fight and I go to IKEA. And I think about what book I'm going to write. And then I punish myself for everything I did wrong with every client this week. Because that is like, okay, there's that like bludgeoning again. Oh, okay, cool. At least I know where I am. I got my bearings back. I got some control. I got something. And it's like, oh, there's my old friend. Oh, but now I feel so depressed. Well, that's okay. At least I know where I am. Like,
It reminds me of like the internal family systems stuff. Where you have these different parts in you. You know, you have this part that shames you or the self-loathing and the purpose maybe to protect you from the vulnerability.
Yes.
You know, and it keeps this homeostasis even just like in a family system, but it's this internal family system that's going on. So you have the depression, the joy, that, you know, these different parts, and they're all trying to work to keep the same that you've always known it and familiar.
Yeah.
So, trying to keep the paradigm operating.
It's interesting because I can think of what kept coming to my mind, though, is my weight. And I think this would resonate with people. And I remember getting really healthy and getting to my ideal weight and working really hard at it and working out and feeling good, right? But it wasn't a place where it still wasn't about me being healthy. It was going towards an ideal. So I was like, you know, getting my degrees, getting my spiritual life just perfect, quote unquote, rather you can do that.
Oh yeah. Can I get the clip?
Found God, yeah. Oh. Just perfectly. Yeah, right. Haha. and then also working out. And I remember, and to give you a little background, my mother is, you know, it's all about, you know, how you look weight. My father, how you look weight, to the point where my father, you know, stopped talking to his own sister because her obesity disgusted him so badly. And it's only a certain level that we're allowed to be. And if not, it's just, we don't cut off, right? So there's a sense of that perfection and my whole, that side of the family, very German, and we don't feel feelings and we just look perfect. So nonetheless, I remember kind of arriving though, right where I wanted to be. I mean, I really thought kind of like a black swan. I touched it for a minute, right? Like perfect, you know, I mean, for yourself, you just feel like you nailed it. And then crying and feeling so sad and so vulnerable and realizing, oh shoot, I have to just like maintain this now. Like there's nothing like to like I can't like go and like, oh, did I like I got like the muscle's going to get a little more, because I don't want to become like, that's not perfect to become like a muscle person. And I don't want to lose any more weight because I'm perfect, quote unquote, right? I found my ideal. So what do I do? I don't have any struggle anymore. And immediately, I mean, I couldn't stop myself from starting to overeat and exercise less. It was like I needed the struggle. It was like, then I'm like, oh. And then as soon as like I gained a little bit of weight, I was like, oh, good. I have something to go for again. And I have something that I'm not at. I'm not there yet. I haven't arrived yet. Oh, good. It's like I needed to always have something to arrive at. And I just gave in. I just let go and thought, what would happen if I didn't even try? And that worked and didn't work, right? It's been working and not working. And lately I've been exercising a lot more and kind of in that space. And all I notice is though, oh my gosh, if I hadn't grieved for the past, few years that I'll never, sacrifice of non-arrival, I'll never arrive anywhere, then this could be horrible, or this could end up being kind of just wonderful and feel good and feel good about eating well and feel good about losing weight. Now I know it's a big issue, losing weight, because it's all symbolic, but I think the same thing. It's like with relationship, we can do the same thing because, weight is a relationship as our bodies, right? And the same thing with relationship. It's this idea that we can think we're going to be in this ideal place, and to just accept the sacrifice of non-arrival in relationship as well. Is such a huge thing that I'm never going to get to a place with my husband and say, and we nailed it. Did it. Arrived. Perfect couple. Yeah. And we communicate so well and it's done, right? It's always going to be just this process of tolerating messiness.
New data, always emerging.
Always.
It never stops.
But knowing that when the darkness comes, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I got sidetracked on taking care of myself. And that's what you said, Jen, too, is I'm sidetracked and I need to listen again, and that there's value. And so we're not talking about when it gets so repressed that it takes over and it turns into suicide, because then we need to do some more deep work and more interventions. But when it's that darkness and that value of depression that we just listened to that says, hey, wake up, shift, change, and you can have joy and get closer to God. As you understand him, right?
And just closer to yourself.
And closer to yourself.
And just, feeling that real connection and embracing that piece of you. Yeah. And it is, I feel like it's, life is messy and it's always changing. Like you said, I don't think there's not this part, there's always something coming. I'm thinking that getting closer to the empty nest thing, I'm like, ooh, yikes. That's going to be a whole new level of probably depression that will hit.
Yeah.
And prepping myself before and going, okay, what do I get to learn and who do I get to become out of this? Because it's a different role. I've been in a certain role and I'm pretty comfortable there.
Yeah.
So,
as you're saying that, I was like, oh, totally. Like, I think... It might sound cocky, but I think I really like who I am now more than I've ever liked myself. So I'm pretty okay if it just kind of stops right here.
I know.
I'd be okay. We've checked off some major life boxes. There's some things I want to change, but if they never changed, all right, pretty good. So I have this fantasy that I have the power to pause it. I could pause life. I'm not gonna grow older and things change and might come to a beautiful aha about how I actually didn't know myself the way I thought I knew myself or God or all of these things. And there's gonna be magic in those moments, but I think I'm at a pause moment in my life where I'm and we're good.
And that's the thing. That's the thing about why it's such a powerful question to ask. Is there value in depression? Because when it comes, it feels like the least valuable.
Oh, yeah. It's like a robber in the night. Yep.
Yes. Robbing me of my joy and my lightness. You got it.
Mm-hmm. It's like that image. I know it's super cheesy, but there's like little meme that came into my life a couple years ago when I was going through a big breakup, the end of an engagement, the end of everything I thought I wanted. And this meme came, it's like Jesus holding the teddy bear, and the little girl, he has the big teddy bear behind his back, and the little girl has the small teddy bear in front of her, and Jesus is leaning over with like one hand, kind of asking her to give over the teddy bear, and the caption underneath says, "But I love it." And she's holding her teddy bear, and he's asking her for her teddy bear, but behind his back is this big ass teddy bear. He's ready to like give her like the real deal, but there's that like, no, but I love it. And so that just came to my mind is constantly, I feel like my depression. I feel like my soul is braver than the rest of me, and I'm like, would you stop already? Like, could you stop leading me? Like,
but when you said that, I was like, well, wait a second. Sometimes little teddy bears are a lot better than the big ones. So why would I want the big one? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I totally want to protect it. Yeah.
Totally. And sometimes it's not a teddy bear. Sometimes it's something else, and you got to get used to something else. And it doesn't mean it's not going to be amazing after that, but it's that unknown and that switch and the letting go before you know it's going to come, It's that T.S. Eliot.
Yeah, it's so weird because, you said like a robber. And then what kept my reverie that kept coming up was when Jesus, says, I'll come again like a thief in the night.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, and we can think of that as, a prophecy idea for the future, but we can also think of it as a present idea that he comes to us in that way sometimes.
Well, sometimes you lose everything to realize you already possessed everything.
And there's the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
Blessed are the meek. Yeah.
Everything you thought you needed.
Blessed are the poor. I mean, there's our value in depression, right? He explains an impoverished person, especially in our culture today, a very poor, meek person, and says they are blessed.
Yeah. They get it. Yeah.
Well, this is a good talk. Any final thoughts that we would want to give the listeners to take away about the value of depression, as if some of them maybe right now are feeling a lack of joy and don't want to go there or feel it or acknowledge the darkness, what you might want to say to them?
I have this funny house metaphor that just keeps coming in my head. Thinking of myself, and this time my power went out, and when you've left a mess in the house and you're busy and the mess has been there for days and you don't see it anymore. It's become part of the routine to walk around it, walk over it, just not see it. Power went out for a couple of days, and I remember getting home late at night and it's pitch black. My cell phone was dead, couldn't use it, so I had to walk into a dark, empty home. And I'm not a fan of the dark. I'm not. And it was a newer place. So, you know where your furniture is, at least you think. You remember where your messes are, at least you think. But you don't when you go into the dark. And I walked in feeling around, bumping into corners, stepping on my messes that I didn't even remember being there, finding things about my home that hurt, that stubbed my toe, that I knocked my knee on, that were painful, but I had to get through to find a light switch, to find a candle, the power that a candle or something that I could light it up with. But I had to get through it, and I had to, hurt a few items on my body in order to get there. And I remember when I woke up the next morning and I saw kind of what I had gotten through, and there was light to those parts of my house and the mess. It was kind of like, oh. And I don't know, I was thinking of myself and those messy parts that I don't even know are there until I enter into that dark space or that depression, and I allow myself to be there. And then it can seem scary at first, but when you go there and you allow yourself to be there and you see what's there, it's been there. You've been working with it. You've been working around it. It's been there. So it's not this new thing. It's something that's been a part of you. I'm just thinking when the lights were back on, it was like, oh, that was manageable. That was okay. Now I know, what's there and what's a part of my home and what corners not to knock into and what kind of needs to shift a little bit. And I survived the dark. Like, no one wants to be alone in the dark, but I survived. So it was just kind of something that came to mind.
Yeah. I'm torn because as she was talking, I thought of something else, but I have this T.S. Eliot quote. So I'll do the quote and then I'll think. So my therapist gave me this. I can't even take credit for it, but it's something that synchronistically kind of keeps coming back into my life. So it's that it's T.S. Eliot, and it's, I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope, for hope would be hope of the wrong thing. Wait without love, for love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and the love are all in the waiting. Wait without thought, for you are not ready for thought. So the darkness shall be the light, and the stillness the dancing. And I remember when she said it to me, and I was like, awesome. Like, well, what the hell does that mean? And then it slowly started to sink in. And I work in recovery, and I work with people struggling with addiction, and that's the way out. Our ability to sit still and wait without hope. That's a badass thing to do. How do you sit still? And then this thing I was thinking of as you're talking about the house metaphors. One of my favorite movies is A Monster Calls. I love it. And the monster says to the little boy, he's about to suffer this tremendous grief, and he says something like it's too hard, or like it's so painful. And the monster doesn't try to cheer him up. He says, indeed. Indeed. But you will make it through. And that, to me, is like all I need to hear in those moments. Indeed. It might strip you of everything you hold dear. There might not be a big teddy bear anywhere in sight, but you will make it through.
Beautiful. And
it is a part of life.
And Liam Neeson does it, which is so good.
You will make it through.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's lovely. Yes. Yeah, I was thinking of the reframe that when I first really went towards, all that I deemed too dark and too shameful and too unworthy in myself, in my own therapy, I began to say, I'll go down there and look at it and touch it. And I felt myself, letting go and descending. And I thought that same feeling of, oh dear, I may never come back. And I said, I'm going down I told my husband that. I said, I'm going down into the caves, the deep, dark caves, and I don't know if I'll ever come out. And he goes, oh, you're spelunking.
I can see him saying that in his face.
And I'm like, what a reframe, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm spelunking. He goes, it's a dark adventure, but, I'm picturing myself all of a sudden then with the little cap on and the light, And so I tell my therapist that. I said, my husband said I'm spelunking, so I'm going to go, I'm kind of like picture myself having a rope and kind of, go scaling down these caves. And she goes, oh yes. And in the caves, when we look, you keep looking, you find hidden treasures, right? Like those French caves, you go in and there's stuff on the walls and you get to read it. And there's treasures. And I keep that and I quote that all the time to people now. In fact, one of my favorite metaphors of thinking that we think it's all dark. But sometimes in those dark places are where the treasure lies. And then everyone wants to see it, right? So,
yeah.
It's good stuff.
I just love what all of you said. So I don't know that I have anything better to add. I mean, I would quote Sam in saying what she talked about, not putting value on it, the depression, a value of a negative value, and embracing it and sitting with it and knowing that it is through that pain is the way out.
Wasn't that interesting? So we say, is there value in depression? And then you end it with, but don't put value on it. There's an interesting...
Yeah. I should say a good or bad label. Yeah. Value. Yeah.
But still, right? In a sense, there is value in it, but also that we want to try to say that it has just as much value as the light. Yeah.
It's a part of life. It's not a bad part. It's just another part.
That has so much to teach you if you listen.
Yeah, so much.
All right.
Paradox.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for choosing to listen to the Don't Go There podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please review us on iTunes. To learn more about any of us, go to www.don'tgotherepodcast.com or www.gazellepsychotherapy.com. Thanks again.